Capricorn, the week of July 26th to August 1st, 2026, puts your own ruling planet directly to work on the most foundational part of your chart. Saturn stations exactly retrograde on July 26th at 14 degrees Aries, joining Neptune in your fourth house of home and family, which is a genuinely significant moment since Saturn governs your entire sign. When your own ruler stations, its themes press with more weight than they would for signs that merely borrow Saturn's influence temporarily. On the same day, a full moon lands in Aquarius, conjunct Pluto, in your second house of money and personal values, forming an exact opposition to the Sun's rare conjunction with Jupiter in your eighth house of intimacy and shared resources. The lunar nodes shift axis this same week too. Several of the year's biggest astrological storylines converge within these 7 days. And for you specifically, the weight lands right on your own ruler and your foundation at once, which doesn't happen often. Let's go through what all of this actually means for your money, your relationships, and your energy, using the real sky, not generic guesswork. Money and career move with real clarity this week, thanks to Mercury sitting in Cancer, your seventh house of partnerships. After weeks of fog, conversations with clients, collaborators, or business partners should go noticeably more smoothly, with less second-guessing on either side. This is a good week to actually finalize an agreement or clarify terms that have been left vague, since Mercury's clarity here rewards precision over your usual instinct to keep negotiating until every detail is airtight. Give yourself permission this week to accept clear enough rather than holding out for absolute certainty on every clause, which is a habit that can quietly stall progress longer than the actual risk warrants. Mars in Gemini, meanwhile, sits in your sixth house of daily work and routine, giving you decisive energy to actually push through a backlog of practical tasks rather than continuing to plan around them. This is a strong week for getting through the unglamorous parts of your workload quickly, which suits you well, even if the bigger financial story of the week is happening elsewhere. Quietly, in the background of your relationships rather than in your inbox. Early in the week, while the moon sits in Capricorn, your own sign, use the extra steadiness to set the tone for how you want the rest of the week to go before the heavier relationship dynamics take over midweek. This is a naturally strong stretch of days for you, regardless of what else is happening overhead. So use it deliberately rather than letting it pass by on autopilot. Relationships carry real weight this week through the full moon on July 29th. Landing in your second house of money and personal values, conjunct Pluto, in exact opposition to the Sun-Jupiter conjunction in your eighth house of intimacy and shared resources. This asks you to weigh your own sense of personal security and self-worth against how much you actually merge resources, emotionally or financially, with someone else. A conversation about shared money, dependency, or how much you let a partner in emotionally may reach a genuine head this week. Pluto's presence adds real intensity this isn't likely to resolve as a small comment, and it may bring up an old pattern around trust and control that's been quietly shaping the relationship for longer than either of you has said out loud. Capricorn tends to build a strong sense of self-sufficiency as protection, and this full moon is specifically testing whether that self-sufficiency still serves you, or whether it's become a wall keeping genuine closeness at arm's length. Venus in Virgo, sitting in your ninth house of beliefs and travel, adds a lighter thread. Differing views about the future or a shared plan may surface too. And an exact Venus-Mars square on July 28th into the 29th suggests tension specifically between bigger shared beliefs and the daily grind of actual obligations. If a partner wants to talk about a bigger vision for the future, while your attention is stuck on the practical demands of the week, name that mismatch directly rather than dismissing the conversation as bad timing. It's a small habit that costs little to change and prevents a bigger sense of being unheard from building over time. especially in a relationship where both people are otherwise handling their responsibilities well. Energy and health this week center on your ruling planet's own station, and it's worth taking seriously. Saturn stationing exactly retrograde on July 26, joining Neptune already retrograde there. In your fourth house of home and family, marks a real checkpoint on your emotional foundations. Saturn entered Aries back in February, opening a new cycle around what home and family actually require of you. And this retrograde is the first genuine pause to assess whether that structure is solid or whether Neptune's fog has let you avoid a harder truth about it. Since Saturn is your own ruler, this transit carries more personal weight for you than it does for most other signs. Think of it less as an external pressure and more as your own inner authority pausing to check its own foundation. The way a builder returns to inspect a structure years after finishing it. A station presses harder than an ordinary transit, since the planet appears to hang almost motionless in the sky. So expect this week's emotional undercurrent to feel more insistent than a typical passing mood. Given that this retrograde lasts until December, whatever surfaces this week about home or family is the opening chapter of a much longer reassessment. Not something you need to resolve completely by Sunday. If a specific memory or unresolved tension with a parent or a childhood home surfaces this week, treat it as information worth sitting with rather than something to immediately fix or dismiss. There's a longer story underneath this single week worth naming briefly. The lunar nodes shifting onto the Aquarius-Leo axis lands the North Node in your second house of money and personal values, and the South Node in your eighth house of shared resources and intimacy. For the next 18 months, your growth edge lies in building genuine personal financial security and self-worth that doesn't depend on merging with someone else, rather than the more familiar comfort of shared resources and intense interdependence. This is a subtle but real shift for a sign that often measures its worth through what it's built or controlled jointly with others, rather than through a simpler, more personal sense of enough. This week's full moon is the opening note of that longer chapter, arriving with unusual force precisely because it's echoing the same theme the nodes will keep returning to over the coming year and a half. It's worth sitting with the specific shape of this shift, not a rejection of closeness, but a redefinition of where your sense of enough actually comes from. So here's where this actually leaves you, Capricorn, heading into August. Saturn, your own ruler, is asking you to look honestly at your home and family foundation. The full moon is asking whether your sense of security is actually yours or borrowed from how merged you are with someone else. Neither question needs a dramatic answer today, just honest attention. If you notice yourself reaching for control or self-sufficiency as the automatic response to either question this week, that reflex is worth naming rather than simply acting on it. It's the pattern that's kept you safe for a long time. And this week isn't asking you to abandon it just to check whether it's still the right tool for what's actually in front of you. If this reading resonated with you, hit like and subscribe.